Hi guys, today we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 7. Last week we looked at Chapter 6. You guys took your midterm. Hopefully that went well for you. We continue on our look today with the kind of fall of the Roman Empire, the rise of Germanic kingdoms. We'll talk about the Byzantine Empire, and then we're going to talk about the rise of Islam. So one of the things we see and what kind of leads to this fall of the Roman Empire is that there's a division. Now this division is agreed upon. It's not a surprise. They're basically going to take the Roman kingdom and they're going to divide it in half. All right, the western part of the kingdom is going to be ruled out of Rome. The eastern part of the kingdom is going to be ruled out of a new city being built called Constantinople, because the guy building it is called Constantine. And again, this is going to kind of divide the Roman Empire. It's not one unit anymore. And eventually the western part falls, and the eastern part is going to last for another 1,000 years or so. At this point in time, we do still see, we talked about kind of Christianity and kind of the early stages of Christianity back in Chapter 6. We see Christianity still kind of small, still kind of growing, still not an official religion of the Roman Empire. That's not going to happen for a little bit longer here. We still see Christians being persecuted by the Romans in charge of their particular areas. We talked about the building of Constantinople by Constantine, and this is going to become the capital of the Byzantine Empire. So basically all of what was the Eastern Roman Empire becomes the Byzantine Empire, and that's going to be the case for a couple of hundred years. And again, this kind of carries on that legacy of Rome as far as, technologies and architectures and all of these things that the Romans kind of stole from the Greeks. Now the Byzantines are kind of continuing on with what the Romans have done. So again, there's kind of this continuation of Roman culture and empire throughout the Byzantines. And again, this is going to last for another 1,000 years. Some of the other important things we see is Christianity does eventually become the official religion of Rome. And one of the things that happens is a Roman leader before battle, as the battle's kind of going on, it's not necessarily going very well, he sees a vision of the cross, he kind of rallies his troops, they win the battle, and he kind of thanks the Christian God for this, right? And at this point in time, we see kind of the pagan, multi-god society that is Rome start to fade away and become the Christian monotheistic society that we see today. All right, and along with this, we see some of the early remnants of the Christian church being put into place. Now, originally, the four main leaders of the Christian church were the bishops of Rome, Jerusalem, Alexander, and Antioch. Over time, the Roman bishop becomes even more important, and eventually that person becomes the Pope, or kind of the father of the Christian church, and that's why we have the Catholic Church today, right, with the Pope being based out of Rome. So again, even some of the things that we see in our modern society trace their roots all the way back to this time period. I mentioned that the western part of the Roman Empire is going to fall, and it's going to fall because of clashes that it has with Germanic kingdoms. We talked all the way back at the beginning of the Roman Empire that they tried to not go too far into Germany. Anytime they ventured past the Rhine, up past the Danube, they tended to have military defeat, so they really used those rivers as a bit of a boundary. Over time, though, as those other Germanic groups begin to grow, they need to spread out. They need to cross kind of back across the Danube and the Rhine, and they come in direct conflict with Romans. Again, both sides win battles. What tends to happen, though, is that Rome, because of a lack of population, a lack of money, bring all of these people into the greater Roman Empire. They allow them to become Romans. They allow them to join the Roman military. So again, all these Germanic groups are kind of now part of this Roman Empire. But again, they're holding on to their backgrounds, their heritage, their traditions, and eventually they realize that they're bigger and stronger than Rome is. And in some ways, they just kind of start to take over parts of the Roman Empire. And again, the Roman Empire doesn't have the money, it doesn't have the military, the manpower, anything like that to really do much about it. Over time, we see, again, these are modern countries, obviously, but places like Germany and France and Spain all get taken over by these Germanic groups. So again, most of that Western German Empire disintegrates and kind of gets absorbed into these Germanic kingdoms. People like the Visigoths and the Vandals and all of these groups kind of sweep down into Rome. In 408, Rome is sacked, and they have to pay a huge bounty in order to get these Germanic tribes to leave Italy, 5,000 pounds of gold, 30,000 pounds of silver. Again, Rome doesn't even have the army to protect their capital anymore. So they have to literally pay ransom to get these groups to leave. And again, this is really kind of the beginning of the end of Rome as we know it. Again, groups like the Franks and the Saxons, the Huns, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, all of these groups take parts of the Roman Empire. One of the other major players we see during this time, we mentioned the Franks. The Frankish kingdom, which would kind of be our modern-day France, which is where the Frankish part comes into play at. Their leader's a guy named Charles Martel. Now, the Frankish kingdoms were kind of divided up amongst three people. Over time, he's able to kind of consolidate that power, make a very large empire. But one of the other major reasons why this is important, we're going to talk a little bit more about this later in the chapter, is as Islam grows, and it takes North Africa, then it takes Spain and Portugal, again, modern countries, not called that then, it's making incursions into France. Again, this might completely overrun all of Europe. Charles Martel in 1714 at the Battle of Poitiers is able to defeat an Islamic force. And that's really what kind of stops the incursion of Islam into Europe. So again, Spain and Portugal are going to stay Islamic for the next 1,000-ish years. But again, we're not going to see much advance as far as France or anything like that when it comes to the spread of Islam. We talked about the early Catholic Church kind of setting some precedents. We talked about how the Pope comes about. One of the things that begins during this time is this idea of celibacy. And it's begun by Augustine, who thinks that, being celibate is a way to connect with God, that not giving into human desires is a way to show your commitment. So again, we see popes, obviously bishops, people in the Catholic Church, nuns, all of these people practicing celibacy. And again, it goes all the way back to these early writers within the Christian Church kind of deciding what it means to be a good Christian. All right. Also during this time, we see the church becoming more powerful politically. Again, the Christian church goes from being simply a religious organization to being a government entity. And we see this in and around Rome with the creation of the Papal States. Again, this is a government that's essentially headed by the Pope. Now, there are some elected officials and stuff, but they're answering to the Pope nonetheless. And again, these Papal States are going to exist for hundreds and hundreds of years. So again, you have this kind of military, governmental entity that's being headed by the Pope. So again, a lot of times what we need to think of is that the Christian church is not just a church. It's not just something you go to on Sundays or, seek advice. It's literally a government entity that controls parts of what's going to be modern day Italy, and has major influence in militaries and all of these different aspects that we would expect from a government. All right, the Christian church is doing those exact same things. All right, one of the other kind of interesting aspects of the introduction of Christianity is as Christianity expands and kind of runs into these other parts of Europe where the people don't know about Christianity, right? They're pagans or they worship different types of gods and all of these different things. A lot of what the Christian church would do is kind of adopt Christianity to make these people more comfortable with it. And one of the great examples of this we have is of Christmas. Around that late December date, now obviously we picked December 25th to celebrate the birth of Jesus, but around that point in time we have the winter solstice, right? The shortest day of the year. And pagan groups throughout Europe celebrated that day, right? That's the shortest day of the year. From there on out, the days are going to get longer. The weather's going to get warmer. We can plant our crops. Summer's coming. It's really exciting. So what the Christian church did is take the big celebration of this rebirth, this idea of forgiveness, the birth of Jesus, and they just adopted it as that time period, right? Statistically, or historically speaking, mathematically speaking, if you look at the stars and things like that it talks about in the Bible, Jesus was actually born sometime in the spring. But we celebrate his birthday in December because it matched up with pagan rituals. All right, so again, what you see within that Catholic Church is kind of adopting all of these different aspects and trying to get as many people into Christianity as they can by kind of intertwining them with some of the pagan beliefs that existed. All right, we talked about the Byzantine Empire. Again, this is really the eastern half of the Roman Empire. Again, it controls kind of what would be modern-day Greece and Turkey, down into the Middle East, North Africa. One of the emperors of the Byzantine Empire, a guy named Justinian, does try to reconstruct the entire Roman Empire, right? He's able to take over parts of Italy and North Africa and Spain. It's fairly short-lived, though, right? He's kind of looking to reintroduce Roman glory throughout the Mediterranean. It doesn't exactly work that well. They don't have the finances. They don't have the military strength to be able to hold all of that land. And the Byzantine Empire is basically just going to be modern-day Turkey, Greece, that type of region, Asian Minor, as we would call it, of that part of the world. All right, next I want to talk about the rise of Islam during this time period because it's a major shift in religion in this time period. We're going to see new empires grow because of it. And it all starts with a guy named Muhammad who was born in Mecca. Now, during his lifetime, he begins to see visions from Allah that he writes down, and that becomes the Quran, or kind of the holy book of the Islamic Church. And again, he has these followers that believe in these visions, and he writes these things down, and he kind of says what it means to be a good follower of Allah and all of these different things. But one thing to keep in mind is that the religion is still tied to what we've looked at. People like Moses and Abraham, people from the Jewish religion and people from the Christian religion, those people still appear in the Quran. So again, it's not this kind of crazy offshoot religion. It's really just kind of a different path of Christianity, right? Like Christianity goes left, Islam goes right, but they still have the same general basis for where they come from. Now, once we see the rise of Islam, they become a bit more of a military power, right? They decide, hey, let's spread our religion to people. And again, they're able to take large portions of what was the Byzantine Empire, places like Syria, and what would be modern-day Israel and North Africa, and all of these different places. We mentioned they go all the way up into Spain and Portugal. Eventually, and we're not there yet, historically speaking, they will eventually take Constantinople. And again, really kind of unify this whole Middle East, North Africa, Southern Europe region into one Islamic state. They're going to be called the Ottoman Empire. And again, it's probably a name you've heard, but again, we'll be taking a look at that as it goes forward. So that is our look at Chapter 7. Make sure that you take the quiz for the week and make sure that you are doing your discussion post. Have a good day.